And hello to you, my friends. Once again, I've showed up without any announcement. And I want to talk to you about what do we do now? Now that the eclipse has come, you heard me talk about it. You heard me talk about how I was not going to be the same person when I came back, which is true. So I don't know what your experience was or what you did for the eclipse. Listen, we're talking about a science of astrology, and specifically Vedic astrology and how it applies to us. And not everybody's going to have the same experience. But I do know for a fact that a lot of people have had very transformational experiences as a result of the eclipse, leading up to the eclipse and then afterwards. Some people had really intense experiences. So now we have to do the cleanup, because the transformation itself, or the medicine, imagine it's like you're a beta test subject for some experimental drug, right? And you have to swallow the drug, and we don't know what's going to happen to you, but your body and your mind is going to go through some kind of transformation, and some people more than others. And so you kind of just have to take the pill and see what happens. And so a lot of people don't even know that they've had this transformation experience happen to them. So some of you do. So for those of you who have had transformational experiences, perhaps challenging transformational experiences, I think it's important now to do the healing. I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, and I really was getting ready to just go to war over some things that I'm seeing. And for a spiritual person to go to war, they have to know what they're doing. They have to know why they're going to war. And instead of going to war like I wanted to, I had to stop and say, listen, this is coming from me. This is part of my transformation. And so what I need is healing now from this very positive transformation. See, here's the thing about transformation. And this is something that a lot of spiritual, beliefs and New Age, whatever, touchy-feely kind of stuff, they miss this. Transformation is always challenging. And when you choose the path of transformation, you know going into it that it's going to be challenging for you. And the more challenging it is, the more transformational it is. And, I talk about going to the gym. Going to the gym and lifting weights is you're transforming your body. And going in it's going to be tough. You actually push yourself so that you go for the pain and the challenge, and you try and push yourself beyond your limits. And then there's the recovery period, and the recovery period can be challenging as well. Depending on who you are, you might feel really tired. I know I do. If I work out heavy, I know I'm tired for a couple of days. You might have some soreness in your body afterwards, but you're well aware that this pain is something you sought after, and it's something that you want, because it's going to give you the transformation that you desire. So when we have things like the eclipse come at us, then we're not always feeling as though we asked for that transformation. So when the transformation comes, then we might not feel as happy about it, especially if the transformation involves getting rid of things in our mind, in our spirit, and in our body that the universe has decided are no longer necessary. But the thing about transformation is, if you fight it, it only gets worse. It's only more challenging. The transformation is going to happen whether you like it or not. But the question is whether or not you are going to be on the other end of that transformation in an uncomfortable way. Last time I was on here and I was doing a talking about transformation, and I was telling you, here's what's coming, right? And there was, I don't know how many of you had a negative response to that, but I won't mention the person's name because he asked me not to. But somebody responded to that and had a very negative experience to my teaching, and I thought about it, and that concerned me, and I wondered, was I off base? So I went back and watched myself, and the areas that this person had some real reactions to. I'm like, well, I don't know what this person is seeing. I'm being very positive here. I am telling you that these things are going to be challenging, and that what the issue is about change and letting go and having things taken away from you that you may be attached to in a way that prevents you from growing. And so when it comes to letting go of things that we don't want to let go of, that's going to be challenging. But it is absolutely necessary, and it's unavoidable. Change and evolution is unavoidable. And so, we, sometimes, listen, we're not going to be able, there are things that are going to happen in our lives we're not going to be able to control, and it's just going to be about learning how to go through that. When you have the loss of a loved one, for example, let's say you have somebody close to you that dies as a result of an illness. Well, that's probably going to be a very difficult, challenging experience. And there's only one way that you can deal with that. You have to go through it. If you try and deny it, those feelings build up, and the pain and the denial and the sadness and the anger and all of that can actually get lodged in your body, and then you end up sick. So really, we're not going to have any choice when it comes to going through difficulty. That is going to happen. But we do have a choice as to how we want to interface with it. The pain may be unavoidable, but if we are willing to allow that transformation process to happen, and if we are willing to, once again, adopt the assumption that the universe has only one desire, which is to empower us. I'm being reminded of when I was leaving the idea of monotheism, and I was embracing polytheism. And what's interesting is that polytheism is a practice of life affirmation, and I noticed that in different polytheist traditions, as I was just glancing around looking at them, a lot of times that's the first thing they say is that this belief, whatever it is, but they happen to be polytheist, this is a life affirming belief, and we believe that the universe is your friend. The universe is here to help you, and the gods are here to help you. They're not here to punish you or to make things difficult. And I have to remember that, because like I said, I wanted to go to war today. I wanted to get on this channel today, and I wanted to go to war. And I was really thinking about it, and I was asking the gods what to do, and I wasn't getting any kind of response other than, this is about you. And you let us worry about that. So I am choosing to do that, and then I realized that what I needed to focus on was healing. So now that we've gone through the transformation, you got to heal. And this is what I want to talk to you about today. So I will be taking all kinds of questions, and again, for those of you that are new to this channel, the best way to interact with me is by asking me a question, so that I can interact with that. I can't stop you from dumping your opinions in the text. For those of you, by the way, there are people that didn't know. If you're watching this live, you can type in. It's a quote discussion, a Q&A, so you can type in your question. And people do like to dump their opinions and their beliefs and all that kind of stuff. I pass that by. So if you want me to answer your question, you're going to have to put a question mark in it, or you're going to have to put, question. Then I'll get it. If I just see somebody's rambling on or dumping their opinion, I'm going to pass that by, because, this is this is about my opinion and what I think. If I want your opinion, I will come and ask you, and I do actually. Some of my students have earned my respect enough to the point where I will ask them their opinions and experiences. But anyway, I want to make best use of my time and best use of who I am, and so that's what I do. I want to take questions. So before we get into the questions, I am going to talk a little bit about the sun and the moon and what they represent and what eclipses represent in my ethnic tradition, which is the Norse tradition, the Germanic, pre-Christian, polytheist Germanic tradition. I'm going to be talking about that, and I think it's one of the most beautiful mythological representations I've ever seen, and I think it illustrates very clearly what this transformation is, and especially the the challenging aspect of it. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of business here. I'll check for questions, and then we'll get into that. So I'll be back in a couple minutes. Okay, so there are some. Did I see any? I always take my glasses off at the wrong time. There are, I believe, a couple of questions here. Let me see. Robert Cornacchia asks, "How's it going, Michael?" Thank you, Roberto. Sorry. How it's going? Since I said I would answer questions, it's going well. I feel alive and I feel powerful. And I am experiencing transformation, and I'm enjoying it and leaning into it. Okay, so Natalia Lokia asks, "Teacher, what has compelled you to want to go to war? What things have you experienced during and after the eclipse?" Well, those are two questions that have two different answers. What has compelled me to want to go to war? Well, I am a warrior. And as a warrior, the true path of the warrior is to fight against ignorance and negativity and destruction. And so I get angry. That's unfortunately one of my responses when something or people who are important to me I feel are being threatened. I get angry and I want to go to war. So I don't want to get into too much specifics about it, but there's been some things that have been going on in the world and in my country that I see is potentially very destructive towards the freedom of human beings. And what's really, the thing about anger is that when you get underneath anger, there's fear, but also sometimes there's sadness and pain. And I have to tell you, it makes me very sad. I did a video about Odin's message of peace because that's how I felt that was important for me to make a stand. And so I've been thinking about these things, and I, what is really important to me is the freedom of the human race. I really want to fight for that, and I'm very passionate for the freedom of the mind and the freedom of the spirit. And I'm somebody who sees the entire human race as my family. And so when anybody in my family is threatened, it makes me very sad, and it makes me want to go to war to protect them. And every now and then people want to contact me, and they want to either share their opinions, or they want to align me with something that I believe is completely contrary to the path of Thunar, completely contrary to the path of Odin. Odin is all about freedom. Odin is a freedom fighter. So for anybody who doesn't know what the army of Odin does, they fight for the freedom of all humans, every single human being on the planet. And what's happening is that Odin is reaching out to people who you would never think that he would reach out to them. People who do not fit into other people's categories of who should worship Odin. These are people Odin is appearing to that have never even heard of the Aesir or anything having to do with what I would say is my ethnic birthright. People have no idea of this. Odin is appearing to them and choosing them. And so we need to understand that. That's so I wanted to go to war about that, and I had to stop myself and say, you know what? That's not my job. And by going to war, I could potentially alienate people who I believe are extremely mistaken and who are, at the very least, unwittingly bringing destruction to their own people. And it is my job to be a place of education and a safe place for everybody. So that means everybody. So I can't go to war, because it's not my job to defend and do fight the gods' battles. They know what they're doing. My job is to educate and to heal, and my job as a warrior is to be a protector. And so a protector is somebody that when you experience them, they will feel safe. And so I want everybody to feel safe, and that means they have to be safe from my own human reactions. When I react out of my fear and my sadness, I can be very I'm the last person you want to mess with. Let's just put it that way. So I have to be careful. Somebody comes to me, and regardless of what I think of their beliefs, if they are honest in their desire to learn, I have to be a safe place. So you asked, so I'm telling you. That's what's going on. What I experienced during and after the eclipse is that leading up to the eclipse, you guys, I was talking with you guys, and I shared with you, I could feel the power coming. And it once again has proven to me, by the way, here's a note for those of you who want to get power in rituals. I've always been teaching that the best time to get the most use out of the full moon or the new moon is the day before, because that's when the energy is really starting to reach its peak. By the time you get to the full moon, the energy has peaked. But the day before, that's when you really feel it, whether it's the new moon or the full moon. And that was true for me as well when it came to the eclipse, is that I felt the day before I was shaking. I could feel the energy in my body. I could feel it coming. So when the day actually arrived, I went and did my thing. And I, had my own time alone with all that, and I did my ritual, and it wasn't as intense, and the energy just started to fade. And actually, I kind of like going to the gym the next day. I just kind of had to rest a little bit. I emotionally sort of hit kind of a low, so I had to just rest and take care of myself, and continue to not do a whole lot of work. But now I'm starting to see the new beginning that's coming, and really working with Odin, the god of transformation, really taking a good connection with him, and now I'm focused on the healing. So anyway, you asked for my personal experience. Thank you. There it is. Let me see if there are any other questions here. Let me see. Any other questions? When I say I'm going to do business, it's like television stations. When they have commercials, they say they're going to do some business. So when I'm taking a break and I'm thinking through what I'm doing, I put up the ads that tell you where to go find my books and where to get a Vedic astrological reading. That's what pays for this, by the way, is, for me to be able to make this a full-time career, which is what I want to do, that's what pays for it. So that's what I mean when I say I'm going to do some business. I'm advertising myself and advertising my services. Okay, again, looking for the questions. Robert Kornakia says, sometimes when we are trying to heal, when we're trying to heal and let go of something, why might think that we have consciously, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time understanding the question, but how do we know for sure that we have at a subconscious level as well? How do you know that you have healed yourself? Here's the thing. There's never an end point when it comes to evolution. We think about that in terms in Western society. We're going to achieve enlightenment, this final stage of enlightenment. I'm going to heal myself of this problem, and I'm going to be done with it. Sometimes you can have that, I guess. You can heal yourself. I've healed myself of all kinds of physical ailments. But I tell you what, when I'm not in my greatest joy and I allow myself to go into fear and things like that, guess what? It starts to come back a little bit. So that is waiting for me, and it's always kind of there to say, hey, here we are. Remember what was important, being happy and following your true joy and being in alignment with yourself, following your orlog. Remember that? Yeah, so if you ever decide to jump out of that, we're here to smack you around a little bit. So it's okay to not be, not know if you're healed or not. It's a day-to-day process. It's thinking about this, I'll go into a little bit what I was going to go to war about, but there, let's just talk about this for a second. Everything in the universe is the continuous now, the ever-changing now. We want things to be static, but that's death. The only thing that doesn't move is death, right? And, even then, the body goes through a transformational process, but, that's the end. So when things have stopped moving, you're dead. So when it comes to what you're calling subconscious healing, which I would say is probably unconscious healing, when you're dealing with unconscious healing, how do you know that you've healed it? When your behavior changes and when circumstances in your outer life reflects back that things have changed. So I don't know, I would have to know specifically what the issue is, and I don't have to get into that. We don't have time for that. I'm happy to do that in a private session. But, when it comes to unconscious healing and emotional healing, it's a continual process. There's never an end point. But you look to see down the line the changes that have come. Because again, we're talking about the unconscious. The unconscious mind has all of the patterns that predict our future, which, by the way, we create the patterns, so just to let you know, it doesn't happen to us, we do it. Feels like it's happening to us. So if you went through a difficult transformational experience with this this eclipse, know that whatever the difficulty was, it wasn't happening to you. It's because you had patterns you had created based on your thoughts, your decisions, your feelings, your actions, which then created a debt. You know, according to our ancestors, the future is called Schuld, which means debt. Should, same word as should. You create a debt that you have to live through, and it feels like it's happening to you, but you're the one that cooked it up. You cooked it up in the kitchen, and now you're having to eat it. So, you know, when it comes to human beings, we are not in a static place either. Listen, I am really, really into my ancestors. And I'm into not just my ancestors 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, although I am. I'm into my ancestors 40,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago. And they were very different from me, even though I am their direct descendant. They were very different from me. And so this is, without getting too specific, you'll be able to know what I'm talking about. You know, people want to talk about, you know, our ancestors as though they were just this fixed thing. And, you know, when did that happen? And what point in time did your ancestor become your ancestor and the one before it wasn't? It doesn't work like that. It's you know, things move and they flow. And so it's okay to focus on one aspect of that transformation, but it's actually a form of insanity to believe that we are not personally related to those same ancestors 50,000 years ago, 75,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. We are still connected to them, and we still have all the gifts that they've given us. So, anyway, like I said, I'm not going to go to war today, so I won't get too specific about it. But for those of you that are able to, I'm sure you're quite knowledgeable of what I'm talking about. So I think I answered your question there. Okay, so question mark Oak Tree 69 says, I now feel unattached from the world, like I'm observing, even from my children and family who I would physically die for, but in a good way. Why is this, please? Well, I would have to see your Vedic astrological chart, because what I'm hearing is that Ketu, which is the south node of the moon, has had a powerful effect on it. And one of the things that made this this eclipse so powerful is that it wasn't just that the north node of the moon, which is usually associated with eclipses, but it also had a connection to the south node of the moon, was very connected to it, because, and I won't get into it, but also the sun and the moon and all that. So if you're feeling like you've been ripped away from this earth and you feel unattached, that's Ketu. The aspect of the planets that drive us to become incarnated is Rahu. Rahu is our obsessions, our desires, unfulfilled desires, our ambitions, our addictions. But on the positive side, it's our desires. And so our desires is what drives us. It pulls us into physical manifestation so that we can experience our desires. Ketu is that which seeks to take us out of physical manifestation. And so what happens is we become detached from our desires, our obsessions. We become feeling detached and aloof from this physical world. So if, you know, by the way, anybody listening, if you want Vedic astrological reading, go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. I would be happy to show you where all of these things are in your chart, which will let you know what you've mastered in previous lives that no longer interests you, but that you have you're unknowingly a master of it. So K2 can bring mastery and fame if you are not attached to it. So that's what I see here. That you had a liberating experience as a result of this. And this is where the challenge is that if somebody has an attachment to whatever it is, family, you mentioned family and children and all that, if you have an attachment that is not, that is preventing you, there's an illusionary, like you take on too much responsibility for your kids, and it's up to you to make sure that your kids, and you don't let your kids have their own life, well then K2 by example could come in and sort of tear that away from you. But if you're holding on to it, then it will be a very challenging experience. It'll feel like you're dying. But if you let go and you allow the transformation to happen, then it can still be challenging, but afterwards you feel this liberation. It doesn't make you any less of a parent, if we use that same analogy. It doesn't make you any less of a loving parent. In fact, it'll make you a better parent, because you're not projecting your personal issues onto your kids. That's just one example. Okay. Again, looking for the questions. I wish this chat would stop bouncing all over the place. Okay. Brainstorm is asking how to heal chronic sinus. Well, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to give you any kind of any kind of medical advice. I can tell you that there's this thing that I've used for a long time. It's called Grossan, Grossan, and it's like a water pick but for your nose, and I use it every day. I basically clean out my sinuses every day. And if you've got like a sinus infection, what doctors are saying now, which I completely agree with, is that you need to clean out your sinuses, because what happens is if you're the mucus gets stuck in there, then it starts to ferment and it turns into an infection. So that's one thing I would recommend, is cleaning out. You can get a neti pot as well, but there's a little machine called a Grossan, Grossan. I use that all the time, and I highly recommend it. Outside of that, I gotta say that you need to go see a health professional about that, because I'm not qualified. All right, looking again for the questions. What is new in the world? That's a big question. It's got to be more specific than that. Question, Denise Garou, I hope I pronounced that correctly, says, why are some people saying the eclipse was fake? Big F. Go back and watch my videos on the reptilian, all the reptilian stuff, and exiting the Matrix. I don't know, how much you know, but there's a whole belief system out there that there's this conspiracy. There's a conspiracy by the elites, we don't know who, for whatever reason, that are trying to tell us that the Earth is flat and that the moon is a disk, and that there is no eclipse and all that. So I don't buy into that. In fact, I say any belief system that operates in fear, dump it. And that's even to say, even if there, listen, there are conspiracies. There are real conspiracies out there that have long-ranging effects on all kinds of things. But it doesn't serve anybody to get wrapped up in it. It accomplishes nothing. So drop all the fear stuff. I'm not saying that you're fearful, Denise, but why are they saying that? Because they're coming from probably from some conspiracy theory belief system that I believe is rooted in fear, and I say dump it. Okay. Natalia Lokia says, teacher, have you looked into transcribing Vedic astrology into Teutonic mythology? Have I looked into it? Well, I've certainly thought along those lines. I have thought about doing that, especially with the North Star astrology. I have thought about it. I don't feel ready for that yet, to do that. But since you've asked, that may mean that it's something that I should look into. One of the difficulties with This is true with Vedic deities as well. When I mean by Vedic, I mean the pre-Hindu deities. The Hindu deities, there are pretty clear associations with planets. But once you start going into some really, really deep Vedic stuff, it's kind of hard. For instance, let's talk about Indra. Indra is, when you worship Indra, you are automatically working with Sun, Moon, Mars, and Jupiter. So that's why it's kind of hard. The Vedics tried to do that early on, and they ascribed Indra to Jupiter, but it's actually, he's all those things. Thunar, for example, is all of those same that I just mentioned, because he is, instead of Inthura, he is Thunar, Thor, but he's more lunar. So it's a tough, it's kind of tough to do that. I've thought about it, and maybe I'll be able to do that someday, but I haven't got there yet. In any case, thank you for that. I don't have a corresponding list. You're asking, do I have a list of the names and ideas? It's not a one-to-one yet in my mind, so I don't have a list. Anyway, thank you for the question. All right, so now I'm going to go into kind of along that same line. We're going to talk about this, but from my ancestral perspective, which is that you know, when we're talking about Vedic astrology, we talk about the north and the south node of the moon, and we talk about Rahu and Ketu, and how Rahu and Ketu create eclipses and what all that means. But now I want to share with you at least one of the myths from my ancestors, the Norse, who talk about eclipses as well, but in a much broader framework. And they talk about the two wolves that are chasing the sun and the moon. And the two wolves' name translate as mockery and hatred. And so it's important to know what they're talking about. Now, when you look directly at, I don't have the poem in front of me, but when you look at the the poem, it can be a little confusing. And by the way, if you want to just go onto my channel and type in the wolves, Hati and Skoll, H-A-T-I and S-K-O-L-L. Go onto my channel and look at that. And I talk specifically about why, you know, which one is doing what. But we have one wolf which is chasing after the moon, and his name is called Mockery. And so what does that mean? What does that mean that Mockery is seeking to swallow the moon? Well, to understand that, we have to once again refresh our memories on what the meaning of what is the moon. So the moon in modern English now, M-O-O-N, used to be pronounced man. If you go far, if you follow that, the pronunciation back to the original Proto-Germanic, it was man. And man in the Indo-European, because you find it in Sanskrit as manas, and you have it at the first human, according to the Germanic tradition, was called Manuj, and I forget his name in the Vedic, but he has the same name. Anyway, bottom line is the same root as man, which means mind. So human beings are mind on this earth. And so what is it that destroys human beings? Mockery. And we think about this in terms of the mind, because the mind is what allows us to see things objectively. The mind is not the intellect. The intellect wants to pick things apart. We need the intellect because without the intellect we wouldn't know which side of the street we're supposed to drive on. Here in the United States, you have to drive on the right side of the street. If you drive on the left side of the street, there's a good chance you're going to cause a very serious accident. If not, you're going to get a serious ticket. Might lose your license. So we need the intellect. We have to pick things apart in order to survive. But the moon and the mind go beyond the intellect. The intellect cannot, does not follow you into the spirit. It is all about the physical. This is why atheists and agnostics, you know, when you try to talk to them about anything spiritual, they automatically say, yeah, but I can explain that away. And you can. You know, I talk about that a lot, that there's ways of changing your reality, but when you truly do it with true magic, nobody will ever know you did anything. You'll be able to explain it. It'll be recorded into the fabric of time-space, and it'll look as though it was supposed to happen forever. But the intellect can't comprehend that because it has to chop things up into little pieces. So we have the mind, we have man. And man is who you are. You are man. We are not animals. Animals have spirits. Animals have emotions. Animals reincarnate. Animals, I love animals. You know, I've always found it so ridiculous when, you know, especially, you know, people in some of the physical sciences want to talk about how animals don't have emotions. Anybody who's had a pet know that animals have emotions. They love deeply. So they have deep emotions, but they don't have man. They don't have mind. They don't have the ability to reflect the sun. That is what the moon does. The moon reflects the sun. And the sun is the spirit, so the mind reflects the soul. So, going back to the point here, mockery destroys the mind. Why? Well, what happens when somebody's mocking you? When somebody's mocking you, they're not just calling you bad names. They're mocking you, they're making fun of you. Really? You think you can do that? You really? You couldn't do that. I don't think, oh, that was great. You know, you show somebody, you know, a piece of art you made. Oh, that looks good. Congratulations. It looks like that retard did that. It looks like a 4-year-old did that. You know, that kind of thing. It attacks your ability. It destroys the mind. It attacks the spirit as well, don't get me wrong. But it destroys the mind because once you are focused on yourself and you become self-critical, you can no longer reflect the spirit objectively. Not only that, when you are self-critical, when your ego's now involved and you're looking at yourself, especially with negativity, when you've got this negative self-image, then you cannot reflect the spirit properly because you're in the way. And the bottom line is that it hampers your ability to shine. Your job is to shine without impediment the full light of the soul, the full light of the spirit, and that is done with the mind. And I have to say that the vast majority of Western society is completely locked in the intellect. Now, the intellect is all about mockery. The negative vibration of the intellect is mockery. It cuts you down, it limits you, it criticizes you, it criticizes others, but it's like an infection that gets in the mind and it kills it. It literally swallows it up and destroys it. So, that's, when I do talk about other teachers who I think are off base, even though, there are times when I get, I get really sometimes very upset over some things that teachers do because I have a strong belief that teachers are here to help. And so when I see a teacher who's causing harm, it's really hard for me not to go to war. But that gets into that whole criticism and mockery thing. And so what I will do is I'll say that their knowledge is incomplete. They have the knowledge, the roots of what they have are good, but they've made it's incomplete, and perhaps they've made some inaccurate assumptions, which then builds more inaccurate beliefs on top of it. So you get where I'm going with this. Mockery destroys the mind, destroys the moon. So that's one of the reasons why I picked these beautiful pictures of the feminine, the healing, the nurturing, coming and healing the moon. In fact, it's very It touches me very deeply, these pictures. This is why I picked them. I especially love that last photo. Really, it just brings up a lot of emotions for me. And I'll tell you why. Because, you know, as a teacher and as a spiritual practitioner, but especially as a teacher, my mind is really important to what I do. Because it is my mind. You know, I've got a pretty good intellect, because I'm pretty good at picking things apart and finding, you know, the specifics of things. But it is the mind that allows me to go deeper. And the mind allows me to connect my emotions. Because the mind is the emotions as well. And as, you know, what I look for in a partner, for let's just say, for example, in a romantic partner, is exactly this. I want somebody in my life who will do this to me. Yeah, it makes me very emotional. And that's how I see a true partner. A true partner is somebody who embraces and nurtures your mind. And by your mind, I don't necessarily mean your beliefs or anything like that. It's your mind has a lot to do with how you feel about yourself. It has a lot to do with, as we've said, how you shine forth the light of the Spirit. And so when somebody comes in and criticizes you out of their own, whatever their issue is, and, you know, your mind is how you express yourself, how you've chosen to express yourself in life, your, you know, life choices, you know, the way you've chosen to fulfill your deepest desires is your mind as well. You need that. You know, who you represent, what represent literally to the world. You can't do that without your mind and your emotions. And so that to me is so beautiful, the idea of the mother, the feminine, just embracing and loving that beautiful mind. And that's what I see, you know, mothers do with children, you know. The true aspect of the mother, while we're talking about the mother, you know, I'm not a Christian, but, you know, there is one very typical Christian, especially Catholic picture, which is Mother Mary. She's holding the baby Jesus. And when somebody paints that painting just right, what you see is the mother that is reflecting back to the child their own mind. Because a real mother has no agenda. You know, this is what unconditional love is. Unconditional love doesn't mean that you go and pick up, you know, a drug addict out of the gutter necessarily. Sometimes true love is letting them stay there, because that's the best thing you can do for them sometimes. True love says that you have no agenda. You have no agenda. And the truest aspect of the mother is when the mother looks at that child and is a blank mirror, so that when the child looks into the mother's eyes, he or she sees their own spirit being reflected back to them. I'll give you an example of this. You know, it has been years since I watched any of these shows, but you know, American Idol or The Voice or whatever. What you see, interestingly enough, is you'll see a lot of really talented people, and the judges will be saying, you know, you're the most talented person. And then what ends up happening, like right towards the finale, is that a lot of times some of them will sabotage themselves unknowingly. They'll forget a line, or they'll forget the word or something, you know, a lyric or something like that. And the judges will be like, if you hadn't messed that up, you would have been the one. And all the ones that I can remember are, these tragic stories of these extremely talented people who don't have the family support. They've got a alcoholic father or mother or something like that, and it's really painful for them because they had to break away from their parents in order to do their own thing. And the people who win are the ones who the mother and the father and the sister have the little placard and say, "Yay, go Johnny! Yay, Jane, you're the best." And they're not necessarily as, in some cases, a lot of times they're not necessarily as talented. But because they believe in themselves, they love themselves, they don't have that self-hatred, the self-mockery, the self-criticism. Because they don't have that, they win. And I've seen that a lot. A lot of success comes from that. So for those of us who have experienced some challenges in that department, then we have to be our own, true mother. We have to be the one who does this. We have to be the one to love ourselves. And if we're lucky enough to find somebody who can come into our life to give us that, then we are lucky indeed. But if we are trapped in self-criticism, that kind of self-mockery, that self-hatred, then what ends up happening is that you will drive those people away. You'll reject them before they even come into your reality. So this is what worshiping the moon is. You wonder, what is worshiping the moon? This is worshiping the moon. When you worship the moon, you are worshiping the aspect of the universe that cradles the mind, that cradles the emotions, that cradles your reflection of yourself as well as your spirit. But how you feel about yourself. This is why Thunar, Lord of the Moon, Thunar, Moon, Lord. Wait, I even have it right here. Wait, I can show you. Thunar, Lord of the Moon. Where are you, Thunar? When you worship Thunar, you are worshiping the protective aspect of the mind. And this is why Thunar is the protector of Midgard. What is Midgard? The earth. Who lives on the earth? Human beings. It is impossible to truly worship Thunar and hate people for arbitrary things like ethnicity, culture, religion, skin color, sexual orientation. You cannot worship Thunar and say you know him if you indulge in any of that. And I can say this: those people who unknowingly, because people don't understand, and it's hard to be angry at somebody when you know that they, I can't say they don't know any better, that because they do, but that there is part of them that really believes in this nonsense. I forgot where I was going, but I can guarantee you this: all of those people, when they leave this life, they are going to be in for a rude awakening. I'm not necessarily saying any punishment may or may not happen. I don't know. I don't think the universe works like that. But at the very least, they are going to be in for a very rude awakening. I wish I could get into more detail. There's some stuff I know about what happens when the Valkyries come. But I can't. I don't have permission to do that, so I won't. And this is why I love Thunar so much. Because Thunar is my hero, because he does nothing but fight for the protection of the human mind and for the freedom of the human mind. That's why he's my boy. That's why he's my guy. That's why I love my Thunar. Okay, so, all right, I'm going to take a little bit of a break here and get myself emotionally put back together. I am going to do a little business, meaning I'm going to do a little advertisement while I get myself ready here, and then I will look to see what kind of questions we have. So hang on just a second. Okay, I'm back. Let's see here. Any questions? Yeah, Natalia Lokia is correct. She gives the Norse names. Skoll is the wolf who follows the shining priest into the desolate forest. I see that as Skoll is mockery that chases the moon. And Hati is hatred, who chases the bride of the sky, which is the sun, which is the soul. So I'll get into that in a second. All right, so Natalia Lokia asks, as the negative vibration of the intellect is mockery, what is the positive vibration? Well, the positive vibration of the intellect is wanting to differentiate between falsehood and truth when it comes to facts. This is, I was going to say Odin, but first thing that popped up is Loki. Loki has a strong, and now that I realize that this is true, Loki has a strong connection to the intellect. Loki is the first one to point out falsities, especially as it comes to people whose misunderstandings or incomplete understandings create destruction in themselves and others. When you read the mythology where Loki is, especially in his big one, where he goes after all the gods and he pulls their covers and and criticizes them and mocks them, what he's really doing is he is going after the negative vibrations that they have of themselves as well. But Loki never does anything except for the empowerment of the human being and for the mind. So the positive vibration, we do have to have a good intellect, but the intellect has to be a servant of the mind. And what the intellect wants to do is it wants to rebel. And so that's its nature. It wants to rebel against the mind, and it wants to, it says, I know everything. And so when it gets attached to the ego, the false idea of the self, then you've got one of those people who just won't shut up. And oh my God, yes, those people that like to argue for the sake of arguing, even though, on an emotional level, they know that they're off base, but they just want to argue for the sake of arguing. So that's the negative side of the intellect. But the positive side is when the intellect says, yeah, I see what you're saying. That makes a lot of sense. I wasn't seeing that, but now that you pointed out to me that way, the positive side of the intellect is that it's able to, okay, I'm getting a better answer to your question here. One of the other problems with false assumptions is that they start with they start with an emotional agenda. So for instance, let's say that somebody has a fear that the world is going to blow up. They are going to have an emotional agenda against the idea of the world blowing up. So if you start talking to them about man-made global warming, then they might very well start going off about how that's made up thing, that the blah and the, you know, the politicians and it's the and they might start going on this rambling on about how that's false. But you can't talk to them because they're so emotionally wrapped up in what they're talking about. Their intellect is unable to look at it logically to see, is this true or not? So I'm just using that as an example, but that could be anything. So the intellect, when it's operating on its higher self, will say, okay, it's great that you have these feelings, but let's see if we can look at the facts. And, you know, see if this is true or not. So the intellect is really important to be able to analyze the truth apart from emotional influence and emotional agendas. And pretty much every, I guess I want to say every destructive belief system has at its core an unsubstantiated and incorrect emotional agenda that then drives everybody's opinions. Like I've said, if you don't have a correct assumption, then your emotional agendas will then dictate every decision and conclusion that you make. And so you could start even with a grain of truth, but once you start making conclusions based on your emotions, then what ends up happening is then you start creating this straw, you know, argument that can be easily destroyed once you get your emotions out of the way. I don't know if I explained it correctly, but I think I tried to answer your question there. Okay, Free Willy is asking a political question. Free Willy, I'm not going to answer that. We're not going to do that here. And yeah, that's as far as I'm going to go with that. Okay. All right, so question, Daggerus question. What planet is Loki associated with? He is associated with Rahu. Period. He is Rahu. All right, moving on. Okay, so once again, a little bit of business, and then let me think about where I want to go next. We're going to talk about, we just talked about Skol, which is mockery, swallowing the moon. And next we're going to talk about hate, which wants to swallow the soul. And that's what we went through. That's what this eclipse represents. So I have some ideas, but you know, usually once I start talking, then other stuff comes out, so we'll see where we go. So let's try and take a look at what does this eclipse thing here mean? How does hatred swallow the soul? Okay, so hatred chases after the bride of the sky. So we have to take a look at our ancestral understanding of the sun and the moon. So just to be clear, before this, all of the planets have both a masculine and a feminine emanation. My thing just said I went offline. Yeah, okay, it does that sometimes. Okay, so all of the planets have both a masculine and a feminine emanation. They also have a higher and a lower vibration emanation. So the same is true for the sun and the moon. Nowadays, when we talk about the sun and the moon, we talk about the sun as being masculine, and we talk about the moon as being feminine. But what's really happening is that just the way our modern culture is that that's what we see. And I'm realizing now the reason for that is because we have been living in the imperial age for, the last 2,000 years. Because you see a lot of indigenous populations will see it the opposite way. They'll see the sun as feminine and the moon as masculine. Part of the reason for that is because when we live in a patriarchal society, meaning that it's run by men, when you live in a patriarchal society, that's how you see. You will see the ruling powers as masculine. So the sun is also representative of royalty. And so the sun represents that which rules the sky, and literally what rules all of life. And so if you live in a patriarchal society, you're going to see the sun as being masculine. Our ancestors saw the sun as being feminine. What does that tell us? That tells us that our pre-imperial polytheist, nature-loving ancestors who lived in direct connection to their immediate environment. They didn't live in cities. They didn't live, distanced from the work that goes into digging into the ground and pulling out the food and planting the food and dealing with the animals and hunting them and skinning them. They were connected to that, and they saw the earth as Mother Earth because it gives them life. They saw that which gives them life as the mother. The sun is what gives the earth its life. Without the sun, there would be no life on this earth. At least no life that we would be able to take advantage of. We need life that, feeds off of chlorophyll. And so we feed off of the, unless you're a vegetarian, we feed off of the animals that feed off of the chlorophyll. And so the sun is our mother as well. And I've talked about this before, but it's worth saying. Sunnah is a feminine word. It means the empty place in the center of that glowing yellow orb up there that gives us light and heat. You have, when you want to talk about the masculine of the sun, we talk about Ra. We have in the runes, we have Raito, which is a solar rune. And so Raito is the ray of the sun. And so that is masculine. The expression, the outward expression, the heat. There's more heat when you go past the surface of the sun. It gets hotter than it is the actual surface of the sun. So the rays of the sun are hotter than the sun itself. That is the masculine, the expressive, the heat. That's masculine. But the actual sun itself is sunnah. Na means nothing, nothingness. And su means soul, self. It means the emptiness of the self, meaning the center of the sun is this place where you have this dynamic energy, and just from a scientific perspective, you have this intense gravity. And the gravity is so intense that it literally smashes the hydrogen atoms, and it is that nuclear fusion, the smashing of the hydrogen atoms, that creates a nuclear explosion, which creates the light and the heat and all that. So this comes from emptiness, the gravity, the emptiness. And so as the Buddhists want to achieve shunyata, comes from the same word of sunna, the emptiness of the self. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm telling you that's what sunnah means. These Buddhists are running around while talking about the emptiness, the true emptiness of the self. Sunnah, it's right there in the words. Our Germanic ancestors called the sun the emptiness of the soul. And so it is that emptiness, that like in Gununga Gap, that emptiness of pure potential. That is where the power of the feminine lies. And so they saw the sky was ruled by the feminine. That is why we have fairy tales about wicked witches. We don't have modern day fairy tales are, the evil male, terrorist or something. He's always a man, and so some other man has to go and fight him. But our ancestors knew that the real power was with the feminine. Women, if you knew the power that you had, maybe some of you do, if you knew the power that you had, you could own us all. I'm telling you, and every man, even you get two kinds of men on extremes, we're all, a little bit of each, but what men want the most is what frightens them the most. What men want the most is this. To be embraced by that superior power of the feminine. And I can tell you from a martial arts perspective, although you wouldn't know this unless you trained with me, but I had to learn how to tap into the feminine. And if I really wanted to take somebody out, it wouldn't be with the power of the masculine. Even in a strike, it would be the power of the feminine. And when you feel that power, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It'll scare the pants off you. There have been, guys that I've trained or who wanted a demonstration, and especially the bigger and the more musclier they are, once you touch them with the feminine, they crumble. There's no defense against it. And I've done that with guys where I just barely tap them with the power of the feminine. And literally they go running out of the room. Can't handle it. Cannot handle it. This is the power of the sun. So, hatred destroys the soul. I'm thinking about this again, and it's just amazing to me how all these connections come together. A lot of what I do is I work with, do relationship counseling from a spiritual perspective, and the main comment or the main complaint you hear from men is, "I wish she would stop nagging me," which is the opposite of this. Every time I look at that picture, I want to burst into tears. That is what men are saying. Men are saying, "I can't stand being criticized," and it's what will destroy a man's ability to stay with a woman. If we're talking heterosexual couples, what will destroy a man's ability to stay with a woman is if he's being criticized. He can't take it. Those little, when you look at a man up and down and you make that little sucking sound with your lips and you just say, did you gain some weight? Or whatever it is. Is that really the best you can do? Whatever it is that you do, why aren't you making more money? I don't know what it is. I'm doing a horrible job at trying to do that. But whatever it is, that little bit of criticism slices men, it takes their legs out from underneath them. Now, what do women say? Again, generally speaking, I'm talking in generalizations here. What do women say? Women say, I wish I could just depend on him. I wish he just had my back. So here we're seeing the same duality here where the mockery destroys the mind. What men want is to be adored for their mind. Sorry, but that's what they want. They want to be adored for their mind. Women want to be loved for their soul. Hatred is the opposite of love. It's actually the opposite of love is apathy, but hatred is love turned in on itself. Because if you think about it, you can't, and now again I'm coming up with some funny things here. You can't hate somebody if you don't love them first. So it makes me think about people who, racists, people who hate other people. If I follow that line of logic, and here I'm using my intellect here, that must mean that these people really love all these people that they say they hate. And what they really are saying on an unconscious level is, I'm afraid that you don't like me, so I'm going to hate you first. Will you please accept me? Please tell me you love me. Please tell me I'm a good person. But because they have such self-hatred, they assume that anybody that's different from them automatically hates them, and so they go out to destroy them. But you can't hate somebody if you don't love them first. That's why I had to talk about this today. Because now you can guess where I was going to go to war at. That's very sad. Makes me very sad. That explains why Odin doesn't go after them the way I would. That explains why Thor doesn't go after them the way I would. Because being gods, they see that what's really going on is that these people are so desperate for love. They need to be loved and accepted so badly that it's turned into this. They've got the flip side of love, which is hatred. And hatred destroys the soul. When you reject somebody for their essence, it destroys the soul. Because what is the soul? Yourself, your essence. And what is it that that men are known to do? Men are known to objectify women, which is what? You're not seeing them. You're not seeing their soul. Women say, I want you to love me for my mind. But what we really want is to be loved at the soul level. That's where we want to be loved at. So that's some pretty powerful stuff for me there. But that's what we're talking about. Anyway, I'm sort of kind of talked myself into a stupor here. So let's do some business. I'll run some ads, and then we'll take any questions. Okay, so yeah, there is a couple. Keep your glasses on so I can see. couple of questions here that I want to address here. The one thinker says, was it this fear of the power of the woman that led man to create cultures in the world that diminish women? What do you think? Absolutely. Let me flesh this out for you. We have right now, we already have the technology, and anybody who knows anything about Tesla knows that a long time ago we had the technology to have free energy, which would cause no pollution. And even if you don't believe that, we could, if we chose to. If we chose to put the time and the effort, we have the ability to create an earth that has free energy with no pollution. So why don't we do it? Those against it will say, well, it's because we don't have the money. It costs too much money. That's just not true. I mean, obviously there's no money in it if there's free energy, but even if it wasn't free, and it was still energy that created no pollution, you would still have people going after wanting to dig up fossil fuels. So think about it. Even if you reject the whole idea of global warming, 97% of scientists would disagree with that. But even if you chose to do that, why the heck are we still using something that pollutes the world? For this very reason, because what is the earth? The earth is Mother Earth. And you have this unconscious hatred towards the earth. And so this hatred is so deeply held on such an unconscious level that you have, and what drives it? It's driven by empires, and what what are all wars fueled by? Oil. Without oil, you cannot win wars, because you have to have gasoline to power all of your tanks and your ships and your planes and all that stuff. Without oil, you can't win wars. And so oil is about conquering other people. And this whole idea of conquering, the whole idea of creating empires, the whole one world, one religion empire that we've been living in for the past 2,000 years. This is fueled by this fear of the feminine. On a deep unconscious level, it's a fear of the feminine. Anyway, there are times that I could really launch into that, and today's not going to be one of those days, but that is the short answer to your question. All right, Renee Michelle says, but there are a lot of men who run away from that kind of love. Wouldn't that simply mean we are not in alignment? Well, yeah, it would mean you're not in that alignment, to be sure. But, and let's balance it. Listen, women run away from true love too. Both sides do it. I do it. I talk to people on the phone every day, and there are plenty of women out there who seek after married men, just continuously, and complain about why nobody loves them. But when you give them somebody who's single and available, they'll throw that guy aside for the married guy every time. Now, that's not all women, of course, but that just means that women do it too. But in terms of the man, I can tell you what men are afraid of. And I guess this is true for women as well. What we really want, again, all men are looking for their mother. I don't care what anybody says. They're all looking for their mother. And it's just a question of whether or not their mother was, less than perfect. Are they going after the less than perfect ideal, or are they going after the true ideal? And we've already talked about what the mother does. The mother reflects back to the child, without any agenda, their true soul, their true mind. And when a man feels that, men will say, with the right woman, I could rule the world, or whatever it is. So to answer your question, what men are afraid of is that if a woman like that comes along who reflects back, and I'm telling you from personal experience, reflects back without any agenda their true mind, then what ends up happening is that they have to face their own self-hatred and their own self-criticism. And that is the worst pain of all. We project it on others because it's so easy. Again, talking about racism. Racism is self-projected self-hatred. I mean, it's self-hatred projected onto others because they can't tolerate it. Because if they were to look at how much they hate themselves, it would destroy them. It would feel like it was killing them. So what do? They project it onto others. That's just classic projection. Classic. Look it up. So when men run away from that, it's because they aren't ready yet. They're not emotionally evolved enough yet to be able to go through the pain. You know, I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, you know, when I've had that kind of love in my life, you know, and I, you know, the best thing I can do is just break down and cry and just let them hold me and let them take care of me. That's scary as hell. And I've been on the other end of that with women as well, so it goes both ways. But that's why. So of course you're not in alignment, but that's what's happening, you know. And I tell clients this all the time. You know, it's got nothing to do with you. They're rejecting you not because of you, you know, because people want to go, well, what if I was more loving to them? What if I just did this? What if I just... No, it doesn't matter. If they are not ready to love themselves, there's nothing you can do to get them ready. And good riddance. If they run away from you, good riddance. Check it off. Next. And don't settle for anything less. I really believe that we can have the perfect love. And of course that means that we need to be evolved enough to be able to look at ourselves and be willing to love ourselves and forgive ourselves, and we need to get our ego out of the way. Self-criticism is ego. Is pride. Pride is self-criticism. You know, what do they say? You know, I'm the most important piece of crap in the room. That's ego. You're either denigrating yourself because you're the biggest victim, or you're the most important, you know. Pick your favorite tyrant. You will see that in them. They're either on top of the world or they're the biggest victim. So when somebody is mature enough to get out of the way of their ego, then they can allow their partner to reflect back to them their true soul, their true mind. Okay. Okay, so our ancestors understood the feminine power. This is Roberto Cornacchia. Our ancestors understood the feminine power. Did that change because of the reptilians and their mind control and conditioning? Yes and no. Yes, meaning that it was the reptilian brainstem. So remember, again, if you go back and watch when I talk about the reptilians are emanations of our own reptilian brainstem. They do exist, but they are within our own mind and we project them. So if you're living in fear, which is what the brainstem is, if you live in fear, then yes, that's what creates that. So that technically, you know, people, you know, this is why, listen, there's a reason for everything. This is why people are seeing elites and government officials as being reptilians. They're absolutely right. Because people who need to control others, you know, that's what we're seeing in them. People who need to control others and use others for their own financial gain are operating from the reptilian brainstem. So you're right. They are reptilians. But we are the ones that create them. Which is why I say don't get into any of the negative you know, conspiracy theory stuff, because that assumes you're a victim and you're not. You can live in a world full of reptilians and still be free. They don't have to control you. So, you know, that's what I keep telling people. Forget about all that garbage. There has always been political problems. There's always been, you know, power struggles, and there always will be. But you can be free of all of that. And I talk a lot about that. All right, so let's keep going here. So I want to think about this a little bit more. I think I'm going to talk about new beginnings. But I want to take a little bit of a break to get myself prepared here. So let us take a look at the beautiful feminine now that we've gone through this transformational period. Let us now embrace the healing of the feminine. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Okay, so we talked a lot about what happens during this transformation. We talked a lot about eclipses. Talked a lot about a bunch of stuff, I guess. And so now we have to go into the healing. Once you go through the transformation, you know, then we have to get to the healing. And so you saw I put up the Berchtanaj rune, the Berkano rune, which is the rune of new beginnings. And it is the rune of the goddess Perchta. If you're not familiar with her, please go look her up. Perchta. Perchta. That is her rune. That's why I call it the Berchtanaj rune, because that's where it comes from. It means bright. So if you know in English we spell bright B-R-I-G-H-T, Brecht, but it was originally Brecht, bright. And the birch tree, if you're not familiar with it, I won't go too into the birch tree. It's beautiful when you think about it. The birch tree was the first tree that took hold after the ice receded in the ice ages. After the ice ages, the first tree to take hold was the birch tree. So that's, I believe, the reason why our ancestors associated the birch with new beginnings, because as they saw the ice retreating and they saw the earth coming back alive, you know, being born again, and you know, all that stuff, all the plants coming back, first tree you see is the birch tree. The other thing about the birch tree that I love, if you ever live anywhere where there are birches, and you've ever used birch bark for fire starter, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's you know, we don't have them here, but when I lived up in North Idaho, I would go out and I'd collect birch bark and use it for fire starter, and when you light birch bark, it pops and explodes like little fireworks, and it burns all these different colors. It burns green and blue and red and pops like, and it's just, and that's what made me realize why the birch tree and the goddess Perchta and the word bright are all connected. Because when you burn birch bark, it's bright, all these different colors too, and when you see all those colors and it's popping and cracking like little fireworks, you realize that it has a strong connection to cleansing. By the way, the reason why witches ride brooms is because brooms were made from birch and birch bark. That was, you take a piece of bark and you can do this with it, with a knife, and then it'll roll up. And you take all these birch bark, rolled up birch bark things, and you tie them onto the end of a birch branch, and you've got a broom. So brooms weren't just about cleaning dust, they were about cleaning negativity. This is the goddess Perchta. She comes in at the solstice, and she brings this new energy. And to this day, to this day you can go to the mountains all over Europe, but one of the places you can go is in places like Austria and Bavaria, where people in those villages will still go out and will dress up in Perchta costumes. It's called Perchtenlauf. And they will bang drums, and they'll bang shakers and bells, and they walk through the streets. That's been going on for thousands of years. Thousands and thousands of years that's been going on. And it's because Mother Perchta is going to clear the air, to cleanse all the negativity and drive away all the demons. And so she's very frightening to look at. And, in fact, do I still have the representation over here? Did I get rid of that? I got rid of it. I'm bummed. Anyway, if you see pictures of her, she's very frightening to look at. But that's only because when you're looking at her as she's approaching negativity. So if you're hanging on to old stuff, if you've got fear, if you've got hatred and mockery, if you've got theft in your heart, if you want to take advantage of people, and a lot of times we have all these things and we don't know it because we justify it. But when she comes to cleanse you of that, what you're going to see is this really frightening old hag with with a knife coming at you. And what she's doing is she wants to cut out of your belly all of these things that are trying to destroy you. And so there's a lot of, she's very fearful to behold. Unless, of course, you've already released all of your unnecessary attachments and fears, and then when you see her like this, just very beautiful. So this is the new beginnings. So new beginnings can be frightening as well. And I mentioned it when I first came on, but I was a little concerned because the last time I was on here, I was talking about transformation, and I was in a place where I was like, transformation is coming, and Rahu and Ketu are coming to tear away your world and destroy your world. And there was somebody who responded and was very upset, and was saying I was being very negative, and I got concerned. So I went back and watched those, especially the parts where I was interacting with this person, and I'm like, I don't see that. I'm actually saying that there is hope here, that you're going to evolve to the next level, you're going to achieve. But I believe the question was, how do you avoid change? That was the question. And of course, you can imagine my response to that. Why would you want to avoid change? Change means you're going to evolve. That's the last thing you want to do, is hold on to it. That's going to make it worse. When you hang on to not being willing to change, and trust me, I get it. I'm human. I'm as human as anybody else. So I understand why people don't want to change. Listen, I don't like change either. It scares me too. I don't know. I don't know what I need and what I don't need. And when things get taken away from me, you know, it's scary for me. I don't like that. So I totally get it. But it has to happen. We have to be willing to lean into that. So this is why when we go through it, depending on what the, you know, what the eclipse does to you, or whatever the change or the transformation any time of year comes to you, you know, then we got to heal. we gotta mourn over that which we lost. We got to mourn over what we thought we wanted. You know, this is a big thing when it comes to helping people, because as you know, what I teach is that your true orlog, your true destiny, your true dharma, your true path is something that you put into your spirit like a program before you incarnated. And whatever that is going to bring you the greatest joy. But the way we've set the game up, the way we've set the matrix up, the way we've set this life, this illusion, however you want to look at it, human life, the way that we have set it up, and you notice I'm saying we. God didn't do it to you. You did it. You did this for yourself. The way that we have set this up is that we choose to incarnate, and every single new life there is going to be a new challenge that will be directly connected to having to give up old ideas about what makes us happy. And so as you go through your life, you will constantly run into these challenges of, do I please other people, or do I do what makes me truly happy? And you will be forced to go through a death of having to make a choice that may be, you know, giving up somebody else's love, somebody else's acceptance, even if it's just an idea in your head. A lot of people just have these ideas in their head about what they're supposed to be and what a good person does. If I'm a good person, I do that, you know, even down to like when the universe will give you an opportunity to change jobs. And I work with people and I say, well, what is it that you really want to do? And they'll tell me, and they'll go, yeah, but I can't make money doing that. And I'll say, how do you know? You love it, right? Would you pay money to have somebody help you with this thing? They'd say, well, yeah. Well, then there's other people that will pay money for it too. That's your job. Your job is to go do what you love and find a way to give it to others in such a way where they pay you for your time. That's all it is. But then they go, well, I can't. I don't have the money. I need to work at this other job first, or I need to do this, you know. It could be a relationship. I had to face that when I left my now ex-wife. I had to decide, am I here to be the good husband and do what I think I'm supposed to do and take care of this person whom I can't please and who is threatened by all the things that make me happy? Or do I go after what I truly want and then be the bad guy who's, you know, bad, blah, 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 blah. By the way, she's very happy now. She's met the man of her dreams, and trust me, he does all the things that I never would do. And she's very happy. So good for her that I left. Good riddance. The best thing I did for her was to divorce her. So this is the challenge. This will always be the challenge in every life that we incarnate. And throughout our lives, we will hit this challenge over and over again. We will be forced to follow our soul or to disappoint somebody or some institution or some idea, and we will have to choose whether or not we want to make ourselves happy or be loved and accepted by others. That's always the same thing, and this is what your challenge will be. I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but as you know, that is my want. So let's see if there's any other questions. Natalia Lokia says, birch trees are hard to find in Australia. Yep, I bet they are. All right, but I do like, I actually do like eucalyptus trees, gum trees. We have them here. We, you know, in Southern California, I think in the 1800s they were, you know, there's not a lot of trees here. It's pretty much a desert, scrub brush and desert. And so when people would come and, you know, create these huge farms and ranches, they would plant tons of Australian eucalyptus trees. So I lived in that. I lived in a place that was basically a eucalyptus forest. So I grew up with that. I love those trees. They remind me of birch in a lot of ways. I love taking the leaves and crumpling them and smelling them. I love that. Okay, dive into spirit. Okay, so let me see. Hi, welcome. Again, looking for the questions. All right. Emerson's Coffee, Bike, and Rum Shop says, I was approached by Kali Ma today. What role does Kali Ma play in this transformation? She is transformation. So as you know, she represents the planet Saturn. So I'm just talking out loud, you know, I'm not speaking for her at this moment. But just off of what I know, since we're dealing with Kali Ma, we're dealing with Saturn, which is karma, past life attachments, or past attachments in this life, stuff that we need to heal from. So if she's showing up, it means that she's there to heal some old karmic, and probably, you know, I know you, so I think it's probably a lot of past life stuff. So she's challenging as well, but she's also the mother. You know, the mother, you know, when it comes to helping you, you know, you know, and you got to have somebody come and dig out that splinter. You know, mom is the one who'll do it. You know, I don't remember my dad digging out splinters. My mom did. Hold still, hold still. And you're like, ow, ow. And she's like, hold still. You know, and she's the one that pours the Bactine on it, and it stings. But then she kisses it and puts on the Band-Aid, right? That's Kali. Okay, so. All right, so no more questions. So let me take a little break here and think about what I want to say next. Okay, so I'm starting to run out of steam, but I'll see if there's more that I have to say. Okay. So again, I'm looking for questions. If you leave a question, I'll answer it. So I guess what I want to talk to you about is, you know, the healing aspect and the aspect of letting go. So, you know, before the transformation comes, that's when you gotta let people know, listen, it's coming. You've got to be ruthless with yourself. You've got to be willing to let your world be destroyed so that it can be put back together again. You've got to be willing to let go of the things that you don't need what you may think you need, the things that you think you want. I remember what I was trying to say earlier was that the biggest thing that I run into when I'm working with people who are trying to find out what to do for a living is I'll say, well, you know, very simply, if you didn't have to work for a living and you could do anything you wanted, and the only thing that you are required to do is just have fun and be in joy, what would you do? And people say, I don't know. I don't know what I want. See, and that's the hard part. You know, sometimes people go after what they think they want. Money, power, you know, fill in the blanks. Money and power, those are the big ones, you know. A big house, lots of cars. And everybody think that's why, by the way, again, if you know, it bears repeating. You know, the reason why The Secret doesn't work is because The Secret says you get in life whatever you focus on. That's only partially true. But, you know, how many, you know, secret, you know, addicts who are sure that if they just keep focusing on $1 million, they're going to get $1 million. If I have a big house, I'm focusing on a big, huge house, and I'm focusing on a Mercedes-Benz, and I'm focusing, I mean, how many, there's still people like that, still living in their studio apartment, driving their beat-up old Chevy, and still, you know, it's because that's not what you want. It's what you think you want because you're afraid. Again, if you believe that the universe is out to get you, if you believe the universe is a cold place, if you do not believe that the universe is there to provide for you and to give you everything that you need, then you're going to start thinking, well, I better get a bunch of money together. But, you know, I mean, I've known a lot of people who had a lot of money and were doing all the right things who ended up getting really sick, and some of them died. You know, I'm getting old enough now that I'm watching people die. But, you know, and they had tons of money. They worked their whole life to build up that nest egg and to get to this and to get to that so that they'd be protected, and then they get sick and die. You know, their life was, in that sense, meaningless. So if you know what it is you truly want, you're not going to worry about whether or not you're going to get what you need. Because when you do what you truly want, you're in alignment in your physical body. Your soul is in alignment with your body, which means your life force energy will be flowing through your body, which means you're guaranteed health. You're guaranteed happiness. You're also guaranteed to get people in your life that love you, because when you're operating from your soul, people are going to be automatically drawn to you. So, you know, I've got nothing against visualization. I do it all the time. But before I do that, I ask myself the question, what is it that I really want? What is it that I really want? You know, and not what I think I want, and get rid of all the fear. Right now, this second, what is it that I really want? Anyway, that was something I wanted to talk about earlier. I sort of forgot. Anyway, so again, looking for the questions. I'm not seeing any. So I'm gonna start shutting this down. So I guess now the time is just to focus on the healing. And here's something that I had to do. Just before I came online, I kind of had to do this. Because as I said, I was on the warpath. And, you know, it was having to do with, you know, also a lot of personal things that are happening that I'm having to go through on a personal level. But also, you know, there were some things that were upsetting me about things that are going on, which I think are a direct result of this eclipse going on in the world. And so when going on the warpath is no longer something that needs to happen, you know, once you've gone to war, then you got to do the healing. Then I needed to focus on letting go. And that can be sad. So allow yourself to have the sadness. Allow yourself to have the mourning time. Mourn what you've given up. You know, maybe this eclipse has, you know, taken away. I talked a lot about it's going to take things away from you. Of course, things you don't need. But just because there are things you don't need, it doesn't mean that there isn't an attachment there. And so sometimes it's, you know, you need to go through the mourning period. You got to mourn. and you got to cry, and you got to let go, and you got to, you know, really need that healing to come through, which is why, you know, as I was putting this together, I still keep coming back to this. I don't know, I might try and like blow this up or put this in a frame or something, because I just think this is just such a beautiful, I just love this picture. I would worship that picture for eons. Ah, I want to be that moon. I want to be on the other side of that nurturing, loving, healing embrace of the feminine. I think it's probably the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So we have to do that with ourselves, too. So I'm running out of steam here. I can't think of anything else to go on and on about. I'll check to see if there are any questions, and if not, then I will, yeah. Okay, I do see a question mark here. Dive into Spirit 33 says, how do you know if you're meant to be a shaman? I feel drawn to this work, but how do you know for sure? If you're asking that question, you have your answer. Again, you know, we get so caught up in what we think of ourselves, and, you know, are we good enough? And really the only thing that matters is, are you fulfilled and happy in this life? It's the only thing that matters. There is nothing else in the whole universe. Everything will be destroyed except for that. The one thing that is eternal and that will remain is joy. And that is what we will be. Eventually, we will all evolve to a place where we are nothing but joy. That's it. And so, if you want to be, this is why I say there's, there's no such thing as a spiritual person or a highly evolved person. I think that's nonsense. The only thing that matters is if you're living in joy, and that's why, all religions, we talk about how spiritual little kids are, because they know how to do that. They just know how to have fun and be in the moment. We do have to grow up and mature and all of that, but we need to use all of our maturity and our brain and our knowledge and all that experience and all that so that we can have joy. So if the idea of being a shaman brings you joy, that's it. You have your answer. That's what you're supposed to do. What that means, I don't know. But this is how you know you're on your path. When what you do brings you joy. It'll be challenging. Listen, sometimes it's challenging for me to do this work. My ego, it's hard on my ego. It's embarrassing. I don't want to put myself out there. It's getting a lot easier, but it really does bring me joy. And apparently it does something for other people too, or there wouldn't be, people that trained with me. So the way you know that you're on your path is, am I being fulfilled in what I do? Is it bringing me joy? And just let that be your barometer. Let that be the wind in your sail that guides you. Follow that wind and let it take you where you're supposed to go. It'll be scary. You'll have to face yourself. You'll have to let go of any ego attachments and fear and, all that kind of stuff. That's going to happen. And it's going to be frightening and scary at times, but it's really the only thing that matters. And I guess the point of what I'm saying is that the whole point of transformation is that. No matter how difficult, no matter how challenging, the end result of transformation, no matter what it's taken from you, is that it's opening you up for more joy, and that is our destination. So just know that no matter how difficult life is, no matter how difficult things are, it really is a crucible that is preparing you for more joy than you can handle now. It's burning away your limitations so that you'll be able to experience more joy. All right, so let's see. Any more questions? Looking for the questions. Okay. All right. Not seeing any more questions, so I think it's time for me to go. Yes, those of you, if you want to train with me on a deeper level, you can go to thunderwizard.com, which is my Patreon page, where you can sign up at various levels to work with me. If you want a Vedic astrological reading, I highly recommend it. And I'm not just saying that because it's, you know, it is my bread and butter, but really, I would want it. It's if you really want to find ways to make your life better practically, I think it's probably the most valuable thing I can offer in terms of a personal service. So if you want power, go get Celestial Qigong. Can't think of anything else, but that's it for now. So all right, well, last minute question. Somebody jumps in here. Big Ounce says, how does belief system affect our progression? A belief system is only valuable to the extent that it aligns you to your deepest joy. Period. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's my belief system or some other teacher's belief system. If any belief system does not align you to your deepest joy, it is worthless. So, that's a short answer to that question. Okay, that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and share my healing with you, and for being, you know what, just let me just say to you, to all of you, thank you so much. I think about you guys all the time, especially the people that I work with. I think about the things that you say and the things that you teach me on a daily basis. I think about how gratifying it is to me that I apparently am able to be helpful to people and bring joy to them and help them on their path. That brings me such joy and such happiness, and it's very humbling to hear that. I know that sounds kind of the opposite of humble when I say that, but it really is humbling to hear that. And it is, you know, you've brought a lot of healing to me by allowing me this format to follow my deepest joy and my passion and to be my true self. You know, you guys allow me to do that. So I just want to give you that thanks before I go. So, okay, so that's it for me today. Until next time, let us all allow, after this transformation, the beautiful, loving arms of the feminine to surround us and surround our beautiful minds, and to heal our minds so that we can see the path in front of us.